what is the standard about this ISO IC 17025-2005. This is a generic standard which is applicable to all kinds of laboratories. This is a general requirement for all the laboratories if they are into testing or they are into calibration. This is the general global accepted standard. How we are going to present this is we'll talk about all the clauses. It is broadly divided into two categories. One is the management requirement and the other one is technical requirement. Apart from this, we'll have some questionnaire which will be given to you at the end. And in case you have any questions, you can come back to us and you can have this in the QA session at the end. I'll start with the very basics of ISO standard. We should know what is ISO and what is the full form of ISO. Basically, it is a Greek word which is isos, that means equal, and the pronunciation is ISO. We generally take it like ISO only. We should at least understand why this ISO is. And ISO is a worldwide federation of national standards from more than 140 countries, called International Organization for Standardization. Right. ISO is a non-government organization established in 1947 with its international. IC is International Electro Technical Commission, which you have seen that a few of the standards are ISO IC. This IC is for the technical part and ISO is for the system part for the standards. And 17025 is the acronym associated with this standard. And of course 2005 is the version. Right? ISO 17025 is an international standard that was developed so that these testing and calibration laboratories were recognized for their capabilities and areas of competence. Right? Some sort of recognition was required for these testing and calibration laboratories. So this ISO committee, along with the IEC committee, they have broadly devised this standard that's called 17025. Earlier it was Guide 25. But now, and afterwards, with its latest modifications, it was ISO 17025:1999, and then it is 2005, which is the latest version. For all these laboratories, this standard is very much appropriate. All the measurements and decisions should be based on accurate, repeatable, verifiable, cost-effective, and timely and believably measurements. And of course, opinions and interpretations has also been included in this standard. The purpose is whenever a testing lab or a calibration lab is giving any measurements, right? They should be accurate. They should be based on some efficient process, which should be recognized, which should be checked, and right, and so that hello, yeah, so that whenever an enable accredited lab is performing any sort of job, say it's testing or it's calibration, the results will be authentic, they will be precise, accurate, and it gives a global recognition as well to the laboratories. which are just practices, which are the best practices taken by the laboratories. These are also the laboratory developed methods. But for both of these, validation is must. For both of these, validation is required. So whenever a lab is using non-standard or laboratory developed methods, validation of the method is required, and for that complete documentation and complete records need to be maintained by the laboratory, which we'll discuss later. Well, the scope of 17025 is applicable to all organizations performing tests and or calibrations. Performing calibration. This includes, for example, first, second, and third-party laboratories and laboratories where testing or calibration forms a part of inspection and product certification. Well, as you can understand, the standard is, of course, used and applicable to the organizations for, say, testing and calibration laboratories. Apart from this, there are first-party and second-party laboratories. By this, you can understand what is the first party, what is the second party and third party laboratory. If a management has a laboratory which is performing job for their own benefit, and they also refer to this standard, right? In the first party, it is the intent of the management that they want to conduct such kind of testing or calibration for their own business point, and wherein the frequency and the criteria of the testing is decided by their management. In the second party, it is let's say it's the supplier or supplier requirement. So as a supplier who is a second party, they also therein the management intent is to get this testing done for them, and for this they use the second party laboratory. Wherein they don't have their own, they can use the second party. And the third party laboratories are the neutral laboratories, wherein they don't have any revenue, any kind of interest, any kind of revenue sharing in the manufacturing of the product, wherein they are a third-party laboratories. They are not directly related to any of the organization which is manufacturing any product or providing any further services. And the laboratories, of course, which are a part of the organization which are doing inspection or say product certification, they can also use the standard. In a sense that if an organization say they are doing certification or they are doing inspection, so they would also require certain kind of laboratories wherein they can go for further testing or calibration. So these kind of laboratories also can use the standard, and this is applicable to them as well. I hope this is clear. Well, we'll see the application of this standard. As 17025 is used by the laboratories in developing their management system for quality, administrative, and technical operations. As I said, this standard is broadly divided into technical and management sections, wherein for the management section there are 15 subclauses, and in the technical section there are 10 subclauses. So broadly there are 25 subclauses under this standard. Laboratory customers, regulatory authorities, and accreditation bodies, they also use this standard in confirming or recognizing the competence of laboratory. So this standard is applicable to laboratories for developing their management system for their quality administration and technical operations. And of course, laboratory customers, as I said, the suppliers or your clients who come to the laboratory and review them, or say we can say they do the customer audits for their own benefit. Then of course, regulatory authorities, say FDA or any other regulatory, say BIS also does the audits based on this 17025 criteria, and accreditation bodies, as you know, NABL, which is the only accreditation body in India, also uses the same standard for doing the assessments of the laboratories. Well, ISO IEC 17025 is not intended to be used as the basis for certification of laboratories. I hope you must be knowing the difference between accreditation and certification. See, as an organization, it can be 9001 certified, but as a laboratory, just 9001 certified will not be appropriate. For a laboratory, it has to be 17025 accredited. For certification, it is just the compliance of the standard during the certification process or during the audit of the certification. Say for 9001, it is just the It is just to check the compliance of the standard with this system in the organization. However, for 17025 accreditation, how does it differ with the certification is? In this accreditation, the competence, the technical competence of the staff is judged, is being assessed. This is the major difference between accreditation and certification. In every accreditation process, it is the competence, it's the technical competence of the personnel associated in the organization, what that is reviewed, and whether they are capable of performing certain kind of job, whether it is testing or it is calibration. So this accreditation standards are vast. Of course, the certification standards are also vast, but therein it requires technical demonstration as well. We should understand who should go for this 17025 accreditation, or whether it is mandatory or it is voluntary. As a laboratory, if it is if it's planning for going for accreditation as per 17025, it should understand who all should go for this, and whether they are present, capable of applying, or whether they require certain further improvements and before they apply. So it will give you a vision what is the level of compliance to this standard. Well, ISO IC 17025 is applicable to all laboratories, regardless of the number of personnel or the extent of the scope of the testing or calibration activities. See, it's not the number. The minimum number could be even 3. We have seen labs, mostly the mechanical labs, wherein the minimum number was 3, wherein one was the authorized signatory and the other one was doing the analysis as well as reporting. So it is not the number which should decide or justify that the lab should go for accreditation or not. And of course, if it is a huge scope or it is just a small one single test, that also doesn't determine that whether you should go for testing, you should go for the annual accreditation or not. So just keep in mind, it's not the number of personnels, neither the number of the tests or the calibration activities. For any number of testing, for any number of personnel, you can go for. Of course, the minimum is at least 3. When the laboratory does not undertake one or more of the activities covered by 17025, so it is okay. See, this standard is beautifully designed. It has given provision that even if out of the 25 sub-clauses, if the laboratory is not undertaking few of the sub-clauses or few of the activities, they can mention that these are not applicable. Say if the laboratory is not into sampling, or if they are not into the using the laboratory developed or non-standard methods, or say if they are not doing subcontracting, such kind of clauses for them in the manual, they can define that this particular clause is not applicable to their laboratory. So this is quite possible. You should understand what is NABL. It is the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories. What is NABL? It is an autonomous body. It is registered under Societies Act in 1992, and it's under the aegis of Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. So it is the only accreditation body in India, but in other countries you'll find there are certain private organizations also, or not only the government ones, there are certain private organizations also who are further recognized by ILAC and APLAC, and for India it's one at the moment, but there are certain plans wherein there are certain upcoming organizations which will be the competitors for NABL as well. As a laboratory, you should understand what is the functioning role of NABL. Of course, it grants accreditation in almost all the areas of science, engineering, and medical testing, like biomedical also, like mechanical, electrical, electronics, thermal, chemical, clinical laboratories as well. And of course, now it has included mobile testing as well. And apart from the testing, they are also doing the accreditation for the calibration areas, dimensional, fluid flow, radiology, and many. The international standards which are followed for medical testing is ISO 15189 For testing, it is 17025. For proficiency testing providers, it's 17043. Of course, you'll get all these details in the website as well. This is the typical accreditation procedure. Now, as a lab, once you're applying to any bill, you always have certain queries, certain doubts that what is the process, or maybe they're taking much time. So as a lab, or as a quality manager, or say as a technical manager of the laboratory, you should understand that in any bill also they have certain kind of procedures, and they have certain kind of processes which need their particular timing. Their time periods are defined, and after proper review, and after the decisions taken by the committee meetings, and then by the Enable Secretariat, then only the issuance of the certificate or the accreditation certificate is made. Well, we'll take a quick review on this. Once you're applying to any bill, you are supposed to attach all the annexures as required by the application, which are mostly staff details, scope, organogram, layouts of the lab, and of course in absence of staff, say in absence of all the key personals, Enable is expecting that laboratory must have the equal arrangements so that the work will not be hampered in case of the absence. Apart from this, the nomination for the authorized signatories, list of the authorized signatories presented by the laboratory, and the participation in proficiency testing or interlab correlations, all for the 4 year. It is the requirement of Enable that between the complete scope must be covered in a period of 4 years for both ILC and PT, or any of the PT or ILC, but the scope should be covered within 4 years. Apart from this, the previous management review summary and the internal audit summary, wherein you have to mention all the non-conformances and the actions taken for that. In case it is going for the first time, of course, the scrutiny is more severe, and once you're very familiar with the processes, then of course you understand what are the requirements other than these as well. Organogram layout. Okay. Once all these documents along with the draft is sent, then it is scrutinized by the Enable, wherein apart from this, the quality manual is first sent to the lead assessor, who does the advocacy of the quality manual. For this, in case they have any query or non-compliances, they then come back to the laboratory. And once that is resolved, then Enable decides for the pre-assessment. Pre-assessment is done by the lead assessor, who may or may not be the similar one who has done the quality manual advocacy. Then once the pre-assessment is done, pre-assessment is just to check the methodology for the final assessment. And of course, in pre-assessment, we check the readiness of the lab for the final assessment, and see what is the compliance level, and see the documentation process, their equipment, infrastructure, the functioning, the role, just to get aware about the laboratory operations as well. Of course, this is not a complete audit, but this is to get familiar with the processes taken by the laboratories, and to check and to plan for further final assessment, and to see how many number of the technical assessors will be required, and plan for the final assessment accordingly. During the pre-assessment also, non-compliances can be raised, which are then informed to the Enable and the laboratory also in the closing meeting, which again is given 2 months period to close. And in case the laboratory has got no non-conformances, then immediately the final assessment can be decided. All this depends on the availability of the assessment team and as per the Enable processes. Then once the final assessment is decided by Enable, the same lead assessor along with the technical team goes to the laboratory, does the complete assessment that covers the 17025 requirements, management requirements, Enable criteria, and specific criteria requirements, and which is then, in case the non-conformances are raised, which is Of course, the concerns are also there, observations are also there. During the closing meeting, all these are discussed between the laboratory management, and then same is sent to the NABL. A period of 2 months is again there for closure of these non-conformances. And once the corrective actions are given by the laboratory in between these 2 months, then the scrutiny of the assessment of report is done by the NABL secretary. And based on the recommendation, it is given to the accreditation committee. Committee meetings are generally twice in a month. And based on the committee meeting, members' recommendation, it is further sent to the chairman, accreditation chairman of the NABL for the final approval. And once the approval is granted by the chairman, then the issuance of this accreditation certificate is done. It is valid for 2 years, and in between every year there will be either surveillance or some test audit. So as a matter of fact, it is sort of always some control or some monitoring is done by NABL. For the initial year, for the initial first year, there will be surveillance audit, which is again sort of complete audit. But in the second cycle of the accreditations, it will be desktop audit. Based on the non-compliances and the outcome of these proficiency testing, internal audit, non-conformances, NABL may decide to visit the lab or to personally review the non-conformances in case they have any doubt. Otherwise, during the desktop audits, they ask for certain documents which are then reviewed, and NABL sends the formal letter that the surveillance or the desktop audit is through, and the lab can use their logo and validation further. So this is all as per the NABL process. We'll go with the international picture. We should understand that NABL in India is having the membership with ILAC. Through APLAC, there are 33 member countries which are part of this. What is MRA? It is a mutual recognition arrangement that in between all these APLAC members, there is a certain agreement that all the reports, say testing or calibration, they will be equally accepted by all over the world. EA is the European Accreditation Board. For these accreditation bodies, say NABL for India, it is also recognized by certain higher authority, which is APLAC, Asia Pacific Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, and this APLAC in turn is also recognized by IAAC and ILAC further, International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation. So APLAC reviews NABL or audits NABL every 4 years. The standard for this is 17011, right? How to get 17005? It's just we're introducing that, as in CII also gives the counseling for accreditation for 17005 by NABL. We provide certain level of services also, and consulting covers the training and documentation, implementation assistance. We also cover a demo internal audit and accreditation process assistance. We give assurance to our clients that our methodology, which is proven to implement this 17005 in the organization. This is the different module which we generally cover during the consultancy process. That is, first we give the inference training. We talk about policy and objectives in reference to 17005 so that the continual improvement can be achieved in the smart way in the organization. We conduct gap analysis to check the level of compliance to 17005, and in case certain flaws are there, we try to modify them and work on them so that further flaws will be removed. Documentation, we assist in the preparation of quality manual, quality system procedures, functional procedures, test procedures, system procedures, formats, and of course functional work instructions. Of course, apart from this, we also conduct programs on measurement of uncertainty and method validation. So for that also, during the documentation, we also provide assistance for how to measure the uncertainty, what are the possible factors which can affect the final results. So all this is done during the documentation process as well. Apart from this, we conduct internal auditor training also, and as per the plan we also conduct the internal audit of the organization so that they can actually know how to conduct and what should be the significance. Then we help in conducting management review, which is once in a year as per the enable requirement, and you can conduct more than one, but as per the requirement, once is mandatory. Shadow audits are there, then final accreditation audit. We also help in the closing of the non-conformances once the accreditation body has sent the assessment team, and till the organization achieves the enable accreditation, CII helps them to first to implement and then to close the non-conformances. So as I was discussing that earlier, this 17025, this is the background of ISO IC 17025. Similarly, the series of 9000 was there. Initially it was ISO TC 176, then ISO 9000 1987, then with the further revisions it reached to 2008. Now there is a draft for 2015 which may be released by the end of this year or maybe any time. The draft is there, which is still with the committee. Well, similarly for 17025, it started as Guide 25 in 78, then with further modifications to 82, then to 1990, and then we devised the standard called 17025. This is typically for all kind of laboratories, which was initially developed in 1999, and now it's 2005, right? Now coming directly to the standard, it is of course the general requirements for competence of testing and calibration laboratories. It meets the principle of ISO 9001. We must be aware about this because the system requirements are almost similar. Covers the technical competency requirements which are not covered by 9001, 2000. I would like to draw emphasis on this why we have mentioned 2000 here, because in the standard, which is 2005 version, right, this 17025 2005 version still talks about 9001 2000 because there is no further revision in the standard. Now that whenever is next revision coming, it will be addressing the latest version of 9001, but so far as it's not yet revised, it is still mentioning the 9001 2000 version, but the basic things are still similar because the basic principles in the system are covered as per 9001. But in the 17025 it covers technical competency as we discussed. It does not cover compliance with regulatory and safety requirements on the operation of the laboratory. Of course, this is the only drawback in 9000 in this 17025 because it does not cover the safety and the regulatory requirements. Of course, it can be the requirement of the management so that they can add on this in their criteria while during the internal audits, because safety of course is a very critical aspect which should be covered and has got more severity. So it can be added in the procedure, in the management procedure of the organization, which can also be a part of the checklist, but as far as 17025 consider, it's not covering the compliance with regulatory and safety requirements of the laboratory. General requirements, it is the standard is structured similarly as any of the other standards is structured. It's having a scope, normative reference, terms and definitions, management requirement, and technical requirement, right? So 9001 is giving the cross references and guidelines for the specific requirements for the laboratory competence. As I said, for management requirement there are 15 sub clauses, and for technical requirement there are 10 requirements, right? Which forms the basic Bible for any laboratory. If you see any organization or any laboratory, whenever they plan to start for a business, whatever could be the business cycle, this is covering all the clauses, right? So whenever you're planning for any sort of business, any sort of organization, you need to understand what will be the organization structure, what should be the size and what should be the type of the management, what documents need to be controlled. Then once this basic structuring is established, then you'll try to understand how the requests, TRFs, contract reviews will be made. Of course, once you've decided what kind of testing and calibrations you are doing, then what will be the areas wherein you require support. So for that, this standard has beautifully designed subcontracting. So in case you don't have a capability for certain testing or calibration or certain kind of jobs which you're doing, say either due to the unavailability of the skilled person or due to the instant breakdown of the equipment, or could be the temporary incapacity or temporary overload. So in that cases, the standard is given provision of subcontracting. We'll come back to these things later in depth. After this, you need certain services and supplies. So for this, purchasing is there. Once purchasing is set up, procedure for all these is set up, then you want to understand the service to the customer, whether your customer is satisfied or not, or whether you require certain further facilities that will attract the customer satisfaction more. So after this, there is complaints. Then there should be a procedure, there should be a process in the laboratory for complaints. After this, there is control of non-conforming testing and calibration work. Like there should be a mechanism wherein the non-conforming work in testing or calibration will be identified, and once it's identified, what is its significance and how to close it and how to resume the work, all these details need to be addressed in this procedure. Then once set this, we have improvement. How can we identify whether the lab is improved? There are certain requirements which we can evaluate, say quality policy, quality objectives, your internal audit non-conformances, external audit non-conformances, feedbacks of the customers, your performance in the proficiency testing and interlaboratory correlations, of course the repeatability and reproducibility, their acceptance criteria, your IQCs, whether they are in the acceptance limit or not. So all these data, when you analyze, you'll get to know whether there are improvements or you shouldn't require certain modifications to reach to the satisfaction level. Then 4.11 and 12 talks about corrective preventive action. 4.30 talks about records, what all records, what should be a procedure for records, what kind of records need to be maintained in the laboratory. And 4.14 talks about internal audit. Once in a year, internal audit is mandatory as per NABL and as per standard as well. But as a lab who is starting initially, starting for going to NABL accreditation, they can plan 2 or 3 internal audits before they apply, so that they actually reach the maximum compliance level to 17005. Similarly, for management review, once in a year is recommended by standard and NABL, but to have the better confidence of the system and the requirements covered, it is important to cover at least twice management review before applying for new labs. What is the difference between a management review and a generally monthly meeting is that in the management review, top management availability is sought so that whosoever is the decision maker will be available and can better address and decide for further actions to be taken. Of course, management review, the responsibility lies with the quality manager. He has to liaison with the lab managers and the availability of the other higher persons in the laboratory. Once in a year it's mandatory, and of course whatever actions are to be taken, the follow-up is done by the quality manager. So this is just a glimpse of all the 15 sub-clauses. We'll come to them one by one. Then this is 10 sub-clauses under technical requirement. We'll just go through them. This is first general, whatever is affecting the uncertainty, whatever affecting the major results, whatever parameters, whatever the probabilities, say personal, equipment, calibration of the equipment, environmental factors, environmental and accommodation factors, of course calculation errors, and all these are all the manual errors. So all these errors, all these probability components which can add to the results, that comes under general, and it talks about what could be the general contents there. Then personals, their capability, their qualification, experience, skills, all this comes under personal. Of course, accommodation and environmental conditions are important for any kind of laboratory or calibration laboratory. So the standard talks about that. Then test and calibration method and method validation. Of course, as I said, that method validation is very important in case of non-standard and laboratory developed methods. So what are the parameters to be covered? It is discussed in this clause, that's 5.4. 5.5 talks about equipment. Anything and everything related to equipment, right from the sampling till the final checks or final intermediate checks, everything, whatever records need to be kept for equipment, all these details are covered under 5.5. It has its own 12 further sub-clauses, right? We'll come back to them later. I would request you all, in case you have a soft copy or in case you have a hard copy of the standard 1725, it would be good if you go through this once, because it is very vast, and of course there are certain notes also which are very important to read. So it would be good if you can go through the standard rigorously at least once. So after 5.5 there is 5.6 that talks about measurement traceability. We say what is traceability. The traceability should be to the national standards, national international standards, that is your SI unit. The highest standard is BIPM Paris, which maintains the highest length and mass measurements. And for radiology, it is BAARC. Sampling, the sampling is different. The sampling covers wherein the laboratory sends their sampler on the fields where from they can collect the samples as per any particular reference sampling plan, sampling procedure, and then these samples are drawn to the laboratory wherein further testing or calibration is done. So this sampling is 5.7 talks about the actual process of sampling wherein if you see in the test or the calibration method or method validation, that's 5.4, it talks about the sample preparation while you are doing the testing. There is a slight difference between sample preparation while doing the testing and this sampling, where from you get the samples and you have a certain sampling procedure, sampling plan, and then you collect these samples from different lots, or say from one particular lot at different locations, different heights, say from 4 corners and center at a height of certain thing. So there is always a reference standard. Even we have certain international standards also for sampling, but in India you'll mostly find that IS is referred. So in the further in the reporting, you have to mention details related to sampling as well. There's always a confusion between sampling and the sample preparation. That is why I laid emphasis on this. Right? 5.8 talks about handling and transport of test and calibration items. This 5.8 talks about the handling and transport of the samples which come for testing. Right? Which comes up testing. For this, whatever is required for the safe handling, for the transport during the laboratory work, say for testing or calibration, and of course while sending them back, there are certain requirements of the transportation and handling. So all these things should be covered in the procedure. That's all 5.8 talks about. And the provisions in the laboratory to avoid their loss and deterioration, identification of these samples, labeling on these samples, the retention period in case they need to be kept in the lab for a long time, then environmental conditions wherein they need to be stored, certain, if in case certain environmental conditions are required, then all these should be mentioned so that there is always less chance of making any mistakes. And of course the contents and the property of the samples should not be lost, right? 5.9, once you have set all the requirements as per 5.1 to 5.8, 5.9 talks about assuring the quality. So in case some complaint is there, or in case some client casts a doubt, how will a laboratory ensure that they maintain the quality of the test, or there are valid results which they have sent, or they have confidence in the results? So for this, there should be some mechanism to monitor the validity of the results. This is all this 5.9 talks about. The standard says, as a lab, And whenever in such situation, you have to have certain analysis or certain statistical analysis. Based on that, you can clarify the doubts from the clients, or wherein you can ensure that the quality of the test and the calibration results is maintained, is monitored, and the validity of the results is always on check. Then 5.10 entirely talks about what should be the structural format of the reports. Say it's a test report or say it's a calibration certificate, and what are the mandatory requirements, what are the provisions given by the standard, right? I hope most of the things are clear. Now coming quickly on the standards covers the requirement of the laboratories performing testing and calibration. Of course, you must be knowing standard methods, non-standard methods, laboratory developed methods we have discussed. This is applicable to all the organizations performing test and calibration. First party, second party, third party, we have discussed. This is the typical national conformity assessment structure. As I was talking about, if you see at the central this block, it is accreditation body. Let's say this is NABL. This is in general, but let's say this is NABL, which is accredited as per 17011 standard. Under this, there are the laboratories, inspection bodies, product certification bodies, which have their particular reference standards with which they are assessed. Right? Higher to the accreditation, higher to the NABL, there is government, which is recognizing these accreditation bodies. Say the regional recognition AFLAC, the international one, that is ILAC, of course. And for the personal certification, which is the reference standard 17025. For the environmental certifies, it's guide 66. QMS certifies, it is guide 62. They are further assessed by regional mutual recognition, AAC, and which is this IAC is further recognized by international mutual recognition, that's IAF. Right? From the left side, these are the regulatory bodies, and from the right side, you'll find these are the laboratories under the accreditation body. Okay. So it is further giving the processes which are undertaken by the laboratories, by the inspection bodies, that you can go through. Accreditation structure in the order for accreditation bodies to recognize each other. Accreditations, the International Accreditation Corporation, that is ILAC, work to establish the method of evaluating the accreditation bodies. As I discussed, that it has been accredited as per 17011. Okay. This is the just the basic how the laboratory accreditation got developed in different countries. If you see in India, which is at the fifth number from bottom, if you see in 1992, the accreditation started here in NABL. I mean, the NABL started, right? And if you see A2LA, it is 1977. And if you see NATA, that is in Australia, A2LA is in USA. NATA, if you see, that started in 1946. So India, if you see, it has started quite late. So still we're developing. These are the very basic definitions of, I hope you must be knowing about what is testing, calibration, management system. Of course, accreditation, as I said, it is the assurance of competency to perform operations or any particular job. Now we start with the management requirement, that is from 4.1 to 4.15. We'll quickly go through the basic requirements. 4.1 talks about organization, wherein the basic requirement is any organization must be having a legal identity, because at any point of time, in case the complaint or the organization is found guilty, then there should be a legal identity so that they can be sued against that. If the laboratory is a part of the larger organization, say it is a manufacturing industry which is having their own laboratory, then the key person's responsibility must be defined so that it avoids any conflict of interest, right? The standard is given provision that it is acceptable even if the laboratory is having permanent facility or at site. Say the calibration laboratories go on site sorry, say at the site also, they can go and do the calibration. So this standard is open for all the laboratories which are either permanent, say on site, or in associated temporary or mobile facilities. Even if you have seen for certain mechanical labs, they are mobile, they are in vans also, but the van is so equipped, so well equipped, and the 1705 requirement is so very well covered that the accreditation has been granted to these mobile vans as well. There are certain testing which is covered by these mobile vans, even in the ERDL also. As an organization, laboratory shall have these basic requirements covered: manager and technical person with the authority and resources, personnel free from pressure and influences, policy procedures to protect customer confidential information, policy and procedures to safeguard competence, impartiality, operational integrity, define organization structure, educate supervision, technical management over responsibility of the operation. The standard generally says that in a laboratory there should be a quality manager, right? It is important that in the quality manual also you define the responsibility of the quality manager. The standard talks about technical management, wherein technical in charge is a part of the technical management team, wherein the overall responsibility of the technical operations lies in them. The standard also talks about the supervision. So in case you have a new joinee or there are some temporary staff, there should be adequate supervision and records need to be maintained. Apart from the procedures for policy procedures for customer confidential information, so safeguard of the competence and impartiality, operational integrity. Of course, these are the basic things in any organization. So management is supposed to have all these defined, and it should be addressed in the laboratory manual, also quality manual. If we say that it is the basic structuring of the laboratory, it covers, it shows how the intent and how the commitment of the organization is towards the compliance of this standard. 4.2 talks about management system. So what sort of management system is required in the laboratory? That can establish and maintain a management system appropriate to the scope of its activities. Of course, it should be appropriate. Document its policies, system programs, procedures, instructions to the extent that they are necessary to assure the quality of the test and calibration results. Quality policies should be there. Roles and responsibility of the top management should be there. We must understand what is the purpose of implementation of the management system. Of course, the basic purpose of any calibration or testing laboratory is to provide its customers a reliable result. But whenever you're giving a result, this is always associated with certain kind of uncertainty. And the lesser the uncertainty, the higher is the confidence level in the results, higher the efficiency of the process. R is the reported value, U is the associated uncertainty at a specific confidence level. Various requirements of the management system as per clause 4 and 5 of ANVIR enable to achieve above on the ongoing process. Of course, it's an ongoing process because the more you minimize these factors, the confidence and the precise and the accuracy of the results is more. 4.3 talks about document control. It talks about the structuring of the documentation in the laboratory. It covers both internally and externally generated documents. Internally are your internal procedures, your internal say in-house methods, which are validated as well, your non-standard methods. These are all your internally generated documents. Apart from this, there are external documents, say your national and international standards. In the internal generated, there could be your designing documents as well, your designs, layouts, whatever is related with the testing or the calibration process. All these will be your internal generated documents, and externally will be the standards, which is the national and international standards you are applying. And of course, internally generated documents, all your system and technical procedures which you have designed, and the quality manual, of course, is a document. Document approval and issuance and preference, all this need to be described in the procedure. And in addition to 9001 requirement, the requirement which is addressed in 1705 is master list, document identification, right? As you know, for the document control, all these date of issue, version, revision in case it's a revised one, total number of pages, end of the document, and issuance of authority, all these need to be addressed. These are the in addition to 9001 requirement. And 4.4 talks about review of the request, tenders and contracts. Any sort of quotation which is received, or any sort of test request or calibration request, whatever is received, what should be the procedure? Whatever the laboratory is doing, all this should be addressed in the procedure. The main emphasis is that whatever the client is requiring, then the proper understanding should be there. And in the laboratory, in case you find that the client is not aware about what kind of standard or what kind of reference method is used, laboratory should educate them. There should be an initial feasibility check by the laboratory, and based on that, in case it is covering all the aspects, the contracts or the test requests can be taken, and in case certain deviations are there, client needs to be identified, needs to be notified at any stage. So the standard says even during the commencement of the test or the calibration, in case some deviations are there, client needs to be notified. And in case certain part of their work will be subcontracted, we should get a proper approval from the client, and that also needs to be mentioned in the final report, right? Then 4.5 talks about subcontracting. As we said that in case of any foreseen results, say workload increase, temporary incapability, need of other expertise, or continuing basis through permanent arrangements, the laboratory can do the subcontracting work, but the only factor is wherein you are sending the test or calibration for subcontracting, the other lab should be enable accredited. And in case it is the requirement of the customer that you can send it to a particular specified laboratory, then of course you can send it, and then the responsibility of the or the confidence level in the results and the responsibility lies with the customer. But in case you are sending it subcontracted for the customer, then the responsibility of the results and the evaluation of that lab, whether that is enable accredited or not, whether the scope is covering this particular method or the range, then all this responsibility lies with the laboratory. The laboratory shall always seek approval from the client, and whatever tests are subcontracted, that will be mentioned in the report also, along with the copy of the subcontractor report. 4.6 talks about purchasing and services. Of course, once your lab is set up, you require purchasing of services, you require purchasing of supplies. Purchasing of services are, say, your annual maintenance, your subcontracting, your calibration, all this come under services. And supplies, the standard says any consumable or any chemical that or the reagent that affects the accuracy and preciseness of the result, all these come under the supplies. So laboratory has to ensure that the quality of the consumables or the reagents that are used by the testing and calibration are appropriate of quality, and they have to do the inspection of these, whether whatever is requested is it the same or the specifications match with the request. And once the verification is done, record needs to be maintained. And of course, once in a year, the evaluation of the suppliers is mandatory. And laboratory is supposed to keep a record of all these approved suppliers. Of course, the service providers. 4.7 is the only clause wherein the standard is specified that laboratory must be willing to cooperate with the customer. So in case any clarification is requested by the customer, say in monitoring the laboratory's performance, in relation to the work performed, of course, the laboratory should allow them, but keeping in mind that the confidence and the integrity of the results of other customers needs to be maintained. It should not happen that this customer is able to understand and to review the results of any other client, which may or may not be the competitor, right? And of course, 4.7.2 talks about laboratory shall obtain customer feedback. This is the in the revised standard, this is the subclause which is added here, wherein the laboratory seeks feedback from the customer, and once your feedback is there, you have to analyze so as to improve the management system and customer service. So this is the only subclause wherein customer feedback is requested, and then the analysis of this feedback is also addressed. 4.8 talks about complaints, wherein laboratory is supposed to have a procedure, have a mechanism of registering the complaints, then notifying the customer, and then the mechanism for investigating the customer these complaints and taking proper corrective actions. And once the complaint corrective action is appropriate and the complaint is closed, customers should be notified and with all the proper corrective actions. 4.9 talks about control of non-conforming testing and calibration work, wherein laboratory needs to have a procedure to deal with such situations that in case of any ongoing work, certain non-conformances are observed, say even by the technical person as well, or even say the quality person. So there should be a process wherein they should know whenever such kind of situation happens, who will be responsible to handle and who will be able to evaluate the significance, whether the work needs to be continued or it needs to be hold, and provide immediate corrections to deal with the situation. So sometimes even though calibration label is not available, but then the equipment is calibrated. So in this kind of non-conformance, of course, the work need not to be stopped, and then the responsibilities and accountabilities should be defined in such cases. Of course, once the corrective action is taken and the issue is closed, then resumption of the work. Responsibility for that is also defined. Generally, it comes under the technical management team. So, in the responsibilities, all these things need to be described in detail. 4.10 talks about improvement, as we discussed. So what are the areas where from you can get the points for improvement is, of course, quality policy objectives, audit results, management review, analysis of data, corrective preventive actions. Corrective action is the action taken whenever any non-conformance has already been identified, or whenever there is any departure from the policies and procedures in the management system or the technical operations has been observed. In the corrective action, you have to identify the root cause, you have to take the action, then you have to take the appropriate, whichever is the most appropriate root cause, you have to see the corrective action for that. Then you have to check for the efficiency of that corrective action, monitor those corrective actions, and in case there is any non-conformance which is reoccurring, then additional internal audits are also addressed by the standards. So, so in case you find that in particular area the non-conformances is still repeating, and then you can conduct an internal audit in that particular area covering those sub-clauses directly. 4.12 talks about preventive action. Of course, the action taken or the needed improvements required to identify the potential sources of the non-conformance. Of course, like periodic review of the procedures is a very good example for preventive action. Developing the action plans to reduce the likelihood of the occurrence of any such non-conformance. Application of controls to ensure that they are effective. All these measures need to be covered, and for this also, there should be a procedure by the laboratory. 4.13 talks about control of records. What kind of records are there in the laboratory? What kind of controls are required? Procedures to protect and back up the electronic stored records and prevent the unauthorized access. All the records need to be held securely in the confidence. They could be your quality system records, and then there are technical system records. So what are the technical records? Records of original observations or the derived data, say wherein you are noting your results, say in a testing or in a calibration. All these records will be your technical calibration records, staff records, your training records, copy of each test or the calibration report which you keep in the laboratory. Uncertainty records, record the persons who carried out the test. All these are the records related to the technical operations. Apart from this, your system records, all the training records, all the staff records, your PT, ILC records, reproducibility, repeatability records, Z scores, all these, whatever is associated with the quality aspects, all these records and technical records need to be maintained and controlled. All the records to be done immediately. It is mentioned by the standard that it's not, it should not be the process wherein the analyst is recording the results in their own personal diaries. It is important and recommended and mandatory that they should note it down immediately once the testing or the calibration is done. And in case there are any errors or mistakes, they should not be erased or replaced, but crossed out and the new value entered with the reason of the revision, or the correct value, the previous value should also be visible. These are certain records which are the records maintained by the laboratories. Internal audit, of course, it shall be conducted on a predetermined schedule. Responsibility lies with the quality manager. Quality manager has to liaise with the lab operations and the technical auditors, which are expertise of the particular area. And once the audit is done as per the requirements of the standard management requirements, enable specific criteria and all, the non-conformances, whichever is raised by the technical assessors and the quality assessors, all these need to be noted down and the corrective actions need to be taken, and follow-up will be done by the quality manager. Similarly, management review is there. Once in a year it is recommended by the standard. There is a certain set of agenda points. If you see the standard, there are almost 10 to 12 agenda points which need to be covered in the management review. Apart from the 9001, there are some additional inputs like reports from manager and supervisory personnel. All these need to be covered, and whatever actions need to be taken, it is responsibility again of the quality manager, and they shall be recorded, and the actions whatever is taken as per the time scale, the quality manager has to follow up. Now coming to the technical requirements, we have 5.1 that talks about general. The laboratory must identify factors which determine the correctness and reliability of the test and the calibration results, that factors that contribute to the uncertainty of the measurement. So whatever contributes to the uncertainty of measurement should be identified by the laboratory. These factors must be accounted in developing and testing calibration methods. So once you have identified what are the areas you can identify them, could be in the developing the test methods, during the training and qualification of the personnel, once you are deciding in the selection and calibration of the equipments. This is a typical source of uncertainties which you generally identify in any kind of testing. Say we've identified it as swipe. So what comes under S is standard. Uncompensated deviation from the nominal value, uncertainty of the calibration, non-homogeneity, anything can be referred with the standard. So these are the possible uncertainties associated with the standard, right? Then W talks about workpiece. So non-homogeneity of the test material, instrumentation resolution, all these could add to uncertainty associated with the workpiece, say the sample. Then I is the instrument. So anything associated with the equipment, say instrumental error, uncertainty of the calibration, instrument resolution, repeatability. So all these will come through instrument. These could be the possible uncertainty factors which are added to the through instrument. Then P is the person and the procedure. Say repeatability, skill of the operator, measuring procedures. All these could add the uncertainty factor. And E talks about environmental factors, the temperature controls in case it is not controlled, temperature variations, humidity, cleanliness, vibration, all these factors add the uncertainty. So all these will come under type A. Now all these, whatever are the, in addition to type A, all these will be coming under type B. Any sort of repeatability of the factors, repeatability of the observations will be coming under type A. We conduct our training program on measurement of uncertainty separately, that is a 2-day program. 5.2 talks about personnel. So anything related to the personnel, say The laboratory can use a personnel which is under contract or permanent with the laboratory. The standard is given a provision. However, the supervision is demanded from the standard, that in case a person is newly appointed or it is under contract, supervision is required. And once the person is authorized to do any particular job independently, then authorization record must be there. Laboratory is supposed to formulate goals with respect to education, training, and skills of the person. There should be a identification of the trainings based on the person's specific requirements apart from the technical qualification and experience. In addition to that, there should be certain identifications of the trainings. There should be a procedure how to identify the training requirements for the personals. Job descriptions, updated one should be mentioned. Formal system of authorization. As I said, if a person is granted authorization, then the records need to be kept. Accommodation and environmental factors also affect the results. So laboratory is supposed to check the criteria documents before they are developing and establishing the laboratories, whichever is mandatory. Say for radiation laboratories, and say for the noise, it should be radiation free in case it's a radiation testing laboratory. Similarly for vibration, the noise level should be lesser than 750. And certain requirements for the temperature and humidity controls need to be maintained. So before you're starting for a lab, you should understand what is the criteria requirement, and based on that, what are the materials that can be used while while constructing the laboratory. 5.4 broadly talks about test and calibration methods and method validation. As I said, that laboratory is referring to the national and international methods, they not required the validation, but in case they are using non-standard methods and laboratory developed methods, then the validation is must. How this validation is covered? There is a specific process, say a linearity, selectivity, LOQ, repeatability, reproducibility, matrix effects. All these are checked. All or few of them, depending on the areas, need to be covered, so as to see whether the method which is valid or not, whether certain modifications are required, and if there is certain acceptance criteria which is defined nationally or internationally, whether how close you are with that, how much recovery is possible. So this is how the method is suitable for that particular test or calibration. 5.5 talks broadly about equipment. The laboratory shall furnish, the laboratory shall have all the resources which are required for performing testing or calibration. It is right from the sampling till you are issuing the report. All the equipments must be available. Equipment shall be accurate and shall be as per the specifications, and there should be a calibration program in the laboratory. And rest all the documents, all the records whichever are required, say identification, manufacturing, name, maintenance plan, all these are required to be maintained. Apart from this, there should be procedures on safe handling, and in case the equipment is sent to other location or say other area, then there should be a verification check or functioning check. In case the equipment is not working or it's mishandled, it should be identified. Identification, calibration should be there. Intermediate checks should be there. Safeguard from adjustments. So in case it's calibrated and some adjustments is done by the calibration lab, then this adjustment should not be tampered by the laboratory, which will invalidate the test results or the calibration results. 5.6 talks about measurement traceability. That whenever the equipment is calibrated, it should be traceable to the SI units, international system of units, and whenever the calibration reports are received, you should always try to refer whether it is having the traceability to the national international system, and whether the uncertainty and all is defined. 5.7 broadly talks about sampling, as we discussed. 5.8 talks about handling of test and calibration items, that we discussed. 5.9 talks about assuring the quality of the test and calibration, that is how to monitor the validity of the calibrations or the testing. Monitoring methods could be internally developed. Internally control participation in laboratory, replicate testing, retesting. Internally quality control using secondary reference material. It is more clear to the chemical labs wherein they are using secondary reference material as well, or sometimes the positive samples to do the internal QC checks. Participation in ILCs and proficiency testing programs, of course, is one of the best method to check the validity of the performances and the results. Replicate testing, reproducibility and repeatability, you have to develop certain acceptance criteria and then find whether in further course of time whether you are able to repeat the results in a similar manner and within the acceptance criteria. For ILC and PTs, of course, Z score is the reference index. It should always lie between ±2, and anything higher to this will be questionable. Power supply will be questionable, and there are certain other areas or parameters like correlation of the item using different characteristics of the item. Sometimes with the experience you get to know, say if this particular parameter, say the compression strength is this much, what could be the possible strain, you know. All this is with experience. So but whenever you are monitoring, you have to make it a point that there should be some kind of reference check, say reference acceptance criteria with which you are referring it to and checking for whether you are in line or whether you are exceeding the acceptance criteria. And for that, in case it is not in line, you have to take possible corrective actions, and the efficiency of the corrective action also needs to be monitored. 5.10 talks about reporting. 5.10, if you see, broadly talks about test reports and calibration reports. All these items need to be identified. So there are certain requirements by the standard which also needs to be addressed in the test report or the calibration certificate. Apart from this, in case there are certain requirements by the customer, they also can be addressed and incorporated in the reports equally. And apart from this, it says that the in the calibration report, measurement of uncertainty is important. Identification of the method with which calibration has been performed, that is important. And information about the subcontracting of the test or the calibration, that is important. And in case it is a revised report or calibration certificate, such information also need to be addressed in the report, and it cancels the previous report. Such kind of information must be there. Well, apart from this, there are the requirements, say, for opinion and interpretation, which is again given by the laboratories only if the personnel is assessed by the accreditation committee or accreditation assessment team. Like in the personnel also, there's the requirement that the laboratory has to represent the authorized signatory, which is assessed by the assessors during the assessment. The auditor checks for its technical competence, and based on the criteria, enable criteria, all the things should match, say the qualification and the experience, and the person should have day in, day out, you know, involvement in the laboratory, and he should be able to demonstrate the scientific, you know, and the technical content behind the testing. He should know the science behind the testing. He should be able to evaluate the critical parts, critical areas of the testing. He should be able to evaluate the calculations. He should be able to make a decision based on the test reports and all. So in a way, apart from this technical competence, this authorized signatory, which is nominated by the laboratory, must be able to demonstrate the test process, and he should be aware of the management requirements. He should have knowledge about 17105 and the enable criteria, and has been assessed by the assessment team, they get formal recognition. So that's all about the standard. Now if you have any questions, you can come back to me and through Anju or through our team. Any questions will be replied within shortly. Thank you so much. That's all. Thanks for your patient listening.
क्वेश्चन आंसर हो गया
है आंसर कहाँ लिखो
आंसर तो पूछ लेंगे
वो आंसर का नहीं है
जो कॉलम है आंसर देने में
हाँ तो वो काम कनेक्टेड क्या करूँ अच्छा अच्छा ठीक है तो the presentation is not presentation is not visible or you may not be in the correlation